From Portland, Oregon, it's time for A Different View, with women's perspectives on the fight to end prohibition again, with Portland Dispensaries examiner and mother of four, Jennifer Alexander, and professional healthcare provider Iva Cunningham from Alternative Medical Choices, Inc. Now, here's A Different View.
Welcome to A Different View. I'm Jennifer here with Iva.
Hello.
His forehead's a little cut off in this. We'll
sorry.
work this out. We're still working on this live stream webcast thing.
Is that
We're
better?
listening to A Different View. Yeah, that's better. Tonight we're going to talk about a few different issues. We're going to talk about, first we're going to speak about the
some sneaky evil doing
in Colorado.
Yes.
Closed doors, no public hearings, trying to repeal legalization. Then we're going to talk with Sarah Caldwell out there in Idaho. She, along with Lindsay Reinhart, have been fighting CPS, and she got her children back. We're going to talk a little bit about these real-life impacts on the kids.
Yeah.
And then,
go ahead. No, I was going to say it'd be good to get an update and to see how the kids are doing. I know that she's had a few challenges, but so it'll be nice to catch up with Sarah Caldwell. And then what were you going to say?
We'll have her on by phone. And then in the third segment, we'll talk a little bit about this big news story about these women that were kidnapped years and years and years ago and were just found. And just a little bit about the issues around that. I guess they were found very close by to where they were kidnapped from. And we have plenty of money to knock down doors of people smoking a joint. But apparently
take their kids away and all that stuff,
and they still weren't discovered. So that's definitely worth talking about. And then I think at the end we're just going to wrap up a little bit with this new growing idea that we came up. I don't know where it came from. Iva thought I sent it, but I didn't. So wherever this came from, it's kind of an interesting idea, though. Very green. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. You're listening to A Different View. We'll be back in just a moment.
Law offices of Omar Figueroa would like to remind you to stand up for your rights. Please do not give up your precious liberties. There's nothing wrong with standing up for our constitutional rights, and in fact, it's the only way to honor the Constitution that recognizes our natural rights. Treat law enforcement with respect and respect the Constitution by standing up for your rights. If you are detained or arrested, stand up for your rights by repeating, "I respectfully invoke all my legal and constitutional rights. I do not consent to any search and seizure. I want to remain silent, and I want to speak to my attorney, Omar Figueroa." Omar Figueroa has more than a decade of experience in federal and California courts and graduated from Yale University, Stanford Law School, and Trial Lawyers College. Please contact the law offices of Omar Figueroa at 415-489-0420 or 707-829-0215. or on the web at www.omarfigueroa.com.
When Mark Emery can be free to run his business and sell his seeds, it's just a plant, it's just a weed, another victim of corporate greed. It's simply business. It's simply business. It's simply business, you know why they won't let us go.
And now we're back with A Different View.
Hello, everybody. You're listening to A Different View. I'm Iva Cunningham, and I've got Jennifer in the chat room. We're still trying out the Google Hangout, the new high-tech stuff to the show, so bear with us. But we wanted to talk a little bit about some sneaky doings in Colorado.
Yes.
With Amendment 64, it seems like some of the Senate committee thought that they could pull the wool over the voters' eyes.
Apparently, closed doors, without any kind of public hearings, and with like the last possible day for them to introduce a bill, the Senate put forward a particular language that would, it sounds like, have the voters repeal the legalization measure that they just voted on.
Right.
You know, it's definitely way too soon to be voting this thing out, first off.
It's like they didn't even try. It's like, oh, we
right. Well, they didn't. These people that are going against this, I mean, you know, they didn't even want to try. They didn't want this to be the case. So our friends over at the Joint blog, I think this is a Johnny Green article, did did an article on it, and this is what brought it to my attention. But apparently the Senate passed it late at night, at the final day that they could introduce bills, and it goes to the House now. And if it passes at the House, it sounds like that voters in Colorado will have to vote to repeal the law they just voted to put in place.
It's absolutely absurd that they would not be in touch with the voters. They would go against the will of the voters. That measure passed by double digits. So I don't understand why they would be so arrogant as to think that this would not have a backlash in other areas, especially when they get ready to run again. Why would you vote for somebody who voted against what the public wanted, even if it was something that you didn't want? You know what I mean? Let's just say you were a voter who voted against Measure 64, but why would you want to support a candidate that was actively pursuing actions against the will of the people like this?
Well, and I think that that's going to be the real serious lesson for Colorado voters. Pay attention. These people are trying to undo what you guys just did.
Yeah,
These
well,
are people that you vote out of office.
Well,
they
the other
don't
thing
care
too
about the will of the people.
And it points out that just because we've passed it doesn't mean that the work is done.
Right. And I guess Colorado's had some issues, and I think we talked about it a little bit last week. They've had some issues working out the taxation. And I think for a lot of these officials, it's difficult to figure out how to reconcile taxing something that you're not allowed to sell under federal law and complying with federal laws as well as the state laws. So I think that a lot of them are just really uncomfortable tackling this issue. And then they've been proposing these outrageous taxes, like so much so that the black market would remain. It inevitably will. We have to be realistic.
There's a
with
benefit
these
to keeping the black market. We talk about this all the time. There's a benefit to keeping the black market thriving, especially for law enforcement. When you're talking about asset forfeiture, when you're talking about victim restitution, when you're talking about, how easy it is to meet your arrest quotas, how easy it is to be a detective in when it comes to the drug task force. So there's everybody's in on the take. So I'm not surprised that they would try to do something like this. But I just find it really interesting that the way in which they did it, they had a press conference to announce that they weren't doing this, when in fact they were doing it. So not only were they going against the will of the people, but then they lied about what they were doing. So,
it was meant to be sneaky. It definitely was.
Well, it's kind of what the Oregon Health Authority did here to OMA.
We've had this happen quite a few times here with OMA. The last legislative session, they waited right up until the very end, telling all activists that were down there lobbying and meeting with them regularly, including in public meetings where they were pointedly asked if there were other bills relating with the OMMP. They said no. And then they snuck it in the back door in a budget bill by making like this requirement that the state fund these programs, presuming it would come from an increased fee, and left them where they had to increase the fees in order to comply with these mandates. And it's the sneaky way that prohibition maintains itself.
Well, the other point here is that it really just emphasizes the fact that just because these things get passed and we think we're turning the corner, it's not the time to not remain vigilant. We've seen time and time again how we affect politics. We've seen that here locally, and we've seen it nationally. And when we pass measures like this, like Measure 64 in Colorado for legalization, it doesn't mean that we can just sit back and smoke our blunts now. It means that we need to step up and make sure that the people that we have voted in place to carry out and enact these laws and help shape them with us do right by the voters.
Well, and we've seen it in both Colorado and Washington. There's a strong pushback to say this isn't going to work, we can't do this, and to fight against this the whole way. The same people that were opposed to its passage. So this isn't like people that regretted their decision. These are the same people we've been fighting against this whole time. Right,
but the thing too, Jennifer, is that the prohibition of marijuana and other illicit drugs have been going on, the drug war, if you will, has been going on for a very long time, much longer than the prohibition of alcohol ever was. And so we have entire generations who don't know anything else.
Right, definitely.
And so the pushback's going to be hard. And so, we're not just changing. People don't know what to do here. They don't know that is posing states against, the federal government, but it's also posing generations against each other.
It is, and there was a psychologist this last week, and now I'm going to have to go dig up this link to post it on our Facebook to make sure that people know what I'm talking about. But there was a psychologist this week that shared a letter written by a patient / student, that was going through a drug rehabilitation class or something with him. And as a part of the assignment, they were required to write a letter to their parents explaining why their drug use was wrong. And I was interested in reading this when I saw the link and the headline. I wanted to see what this kid had to say because I'm a mom of 4 boys, I want to hear an honest voice. It wasn't an honest voice, though. It would have been an F paper if it had been handed in for anything other than drug rehab. It was so horribly plagiarized from every single talking point. Word for word, it was like, I've heard Kevin Sabet say this. It was not a paper, And this psychologist was promoting this as the beauty of our education, that this child wrote this all by himself. And I'm like, no, he's echoing word for word which
begs the question, does pot really affect your brain, or does not smoking pot affect your brain?
I've always said I like that quote that Russ used to use on his signature about, pot is the only drug that addles the brains of those who don't smoke it. It really is. It's just amazing. So this whole time that this child is running through and citing various reasons why he'll never smoke pot again that are like straight. It's not even him rephrasing it as in this is what I gained in knowledge. It was word for word, those talking points. And it just makes me realize that, like, the whole you can't win this argument, you know what I mean, with these certain people that feel this way because they didn't even recognize it as a plagiarized paper. They didn't recognize that those were, word for word, their own words.
Well, because, Jennifer, those aren't their own words. No, if you think about it, it's. I mean, did you ever watch that documentary about Fox, and they would quote the same thing over and over again? And pretty soon, everybody believes it because they've heard it so many times. It's the same approach that Hitler took.
It's propaganda.
Yeah, it's all propaganda. So you constantly say the same thing over and over again, and eventually people hear it enough times they believe it. It's just like they think that marijuana affects your brain cells. Marijuana makes you lazy. It's the same sort of intent, if you will.
Yeah, well, and the thing is there's always that little bit of truth mixed in with the dishonesty and the propaganda, and they do that in order to convert the argument back to their way of thinking. Because in propaganda, that some people are going to begin to question the status quo.
Well, there's truth in all stereotypes. There's truth in all stereotypes. You have to
have that truth to pull them back in. It's got to be enough truth. So, like, it does affect your brain cells. It does. It's called neurogenesis. It causes the growth of brain cells. It does cause certain cells to die. It's called apoptosis. Those are the unhealthy cells that you want to die off. These are the fine-tuned points that they don't want you to hear. They want you to hear it affects your brain and it kills your cells. And then they say it kills your brain cells. And they show you a picture of an egg. See?
This is your brain on drugs. So it's not an untruth. It's just manipulating the truth.
It's absolutely manipulating the truth, and that's why it's so difficult to get people to understand the truth, the actual truth. And it's not to say that marijuana is always good for everybody, and of course not. Eating food can be unhealthy for you. It's also vital for life. There's how you handle these things is what's important, not the substance itself, regardless of what substance it is. We've talked before. You can die from drinking too much water. If you don't drink water, you will also die. So I think that the problem is that we need to be having these honest conversations, and this is with all of our legislators too, or legislators too, because they don't understand, and you have these people not knowing how to make the arguments that they need to make to challenge these laws. I mean,
well,
Colorado.
On the joint blog, just because we're running out of time here, it does say you can look up if you live in Colorado, or even if you don't, you can contact the legislatures and the governor, and you can look them up. If you go to thejointblog.com/sneaky, we'll post this on our Facebook, but there is a link there to click on all the legislatures, the governor, to let them know this is not acceptable.
Yes, and I already posted it to our Facebook page. It's there, so.
Good, because I mean, if you live in Colorado, this is what you voted in. This is what you worked for. Don't let your hard work go to waste. Don't let these people. And we do have power. We have a definite voting power that has been swinging a lot of decisions. So don't be afraid to use it. Well, we're running out of time. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to talk to Sarah Caldwell.
Yeah, when we come back, we'll talk to her about the impact on our kids.
All right, you're listening to A Different View.
Rasta is the peace of the peaceful day. Blossom the peace sky.
Adam Hand of Handmade Apparel produces quality custom designs for t-shirts, hats, and other apparel. Handmade Apparel is the official design shop for 420 Radio, The Russ Belville Show, Ganja John, and Cascadia Concentrates, among many clients who rely on Adam Hand for everything from short-run custom projects to full-run clothing lines. Adam's meticulous designs are individually crafted and screened in vibrant high-definition color. Visit handmadeapparel.biz to browse the selection of handmade gear or to get a personal quote for your own designs. Handmade Apparel, a proud supporter of 420radio.org.
Let them bring in the beat.
Water damage.
Truly techies, we are high in the motherfucking building. House, coast, all that, nigga.
Water damage.
Truly techies, we lie.
Are you going to enjoy good music without good marijuana, huh, brother?
Say what?
Are you going to enjoy good music without good marijuana?
And now we're back with A Different View.
Welcome back. You're listening to watching A Different View. I guess they're doing more than listening.
You're listening with your eyes and your
ears. So last week we talked a little bit about Lindsay Reinhardt, Josh Reinhardt, and Sarah Caldwell, their situation out there in Idaho. They were off camping. They had a babysitter with the 4 children in Lindsay's home, and after an incident at the school where a completely unrelated child claimed to have ingested marijuana, the police showed up, did a wellness check with the CPS, and took all 4 of the children. Sarah has since got her kids back, although Lindsay and Josh are still fighting to get their kids back, and that's progressing. But Sarah's talked a little bit about the impacts on her child since, well, there's 2 children, but one in particular since he's been home. And so we're going to have Sarah talk with us a little bit about how this has impacted her children and herself. Hi, Sarah, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
How are you doing, Sarah? Are you hanging in there?
Yeah, I'm hanging in there.
How are the kids doing?
They're acclimating. It's kind of like starting life all over, actually. You know, setting up health rules. You know, they got to relearn that this is their home and that they're safe here and things like that. And it's been kind of hard.
Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like when they came home? Like how was that reunion?
Oh my gosh. My boys were crying. I was crying. The PSR worker, she was actually a doll. She was very touched that the boys were so right by my side.
Right.
The hardest thing was the things that my kids did afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
My 6-year-old is autistic, and he started packing up his favorite cars, his favorite books, his favorite toys into plastic grocery bags. And I said, baby, what are you doing? And he says, Mom, I'm getting my things ready. I said, what are you getting ready for? And he says, for when the cops come and make me leave again.
That's so rough. That just breaks your heart as a mom for your child to feel that way, you know. I can't imagine what it's like to have that feeling as a young child.
Well, and a lot of people don't understand that with an autistic child, even though they are very intelligent, there's this part of them that kind of holds on to things for a very long time. So, like, let's say he watches a movie, Cars.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to watch that movie over and over and over and over, and you're going to get sick of watching that movie because you've seen it 300 times.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he's watching that movie in his head over and over and over and over, and it's not going to go away.
Right.
He's always going to remember that the cops came in and made him go to this lady's house and spend 3 days there.
Definitely.
Where he couldn't call his mom and he couldn't talk to his mom.
The thing that's most, I think, outrageous for supporters of reforming our foster care system, frankly, but especially, you know, these stories, and I know you and Lindsay and Josh have had a lot of supporters, you know, backing you guys both financially and, you know, morally, or morale. Either way, what I was getting at, though, is that the thing that offends people the most is that people want to see children protected from abuse. They want to see somebody step in and save those babies from, you know, harm.
Right.
But that's not what happened here. They were the harm to these kids. And
That's right.
I think that it's just so astonishing to try to consider what the fear was in the marijuana to make it worth traumatizing a young child in that way. Well,
and it goes back to the, I think, the initial question. What is worse, the situation that they were living in or experiencing, or the one in which they were removed from the home and the threat of never being returned to their parents and seeing the people that they love and take care of them again, which is more traumatic, which is more neglectful, which has more of a lasting emotional effect on those children. And I think that's the real question that doesn't seem to be balanced when we're talking about CPS coming in and taking children. It does frustrate me because, you know, if any, you know, I've been to Lindsay's house. I've been around you. I've watched you with your kids. I've watched you interact, and I have never once seen anything that would make me raise a red flag or be concerned or anything that I was uncomfortable with. I just didn't see it. Yet coming in in the manner in which they come in, you know, guns ablazing and all that kind of stuff, and intimidating everyone that's there, upsetting everyone. There's a lot of stress, a lot of drama, and then all of a sudden they're told their parents, these people that they love, are neglecting them and they're removing them from the home. You know, I'm not a parent, but I do have, you know, I love children, and I have a lot of nieces and nephews and siblings, and it just seems to me that their actions were so much worse than anything that was going on.
For our viewers, really quick, we're showing pictures from the news conference you guys did there in Idaho. Did you want to talk a little bit about what's been happening kind of politically and publicly since this all happened? Like what kind of...
Well, we've gone and we're letting people know what has happened. Our children were not in danger in any way, shape, or form, and they know it. Our kids know it. My son is 11 years old, and he knows it. But for them, other people need to know that this is happening. So we have reached out to the community to let the community know that the police department deemed a place where a mother deemed it safe. They deemed it an endangerment to a child and took them and didn't try to contact any family members or anything like that. You know, people need to hear about this kind of stuff because it's happening all the time. And I'm finding out, like, that my son was interrogated by 3 police officers without any kind of advocacy for him. If you think about that, I mean, imagine 3 people, and he's 11. So they're twice, sometimes 3 times his size. And they're carrying guns and tasers and BB sticks or whatever they're called these days. And that's intimidating to a child. And if a police officer says, isn't this what happened? Tell me that this is what happened. Don't you think that any 11-year-old is going to say, yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll say that. You're going to leave me alone after I say that, right?
Yeah. I was going to say, I don't know
that it's happening.
I don't know if this has come up with you guys and your lawyers and all of that, but I know that in various circumstances when I've spoken with officers to find out how this, like there's school resource officers and this sort of a thing, and they often question kids without, talking to their parents, without talking to a lawyer, none of this stuff. And when I inquired to find out how that all works, their view of the law, at least, is that since they're not charging that child with a crime, they can talk to them as much as they want. It's only if that child is believed to be guilty of the crime that they have to give that child their rights or contact their parents. And as a parent, of course, you don't feel that way. You don't want this guy with a gun asking your kid, kids.
I told my 11-year-old, I said, son, there are 2 things that I want you to remember, and you say them anytime you feel threatened. If somebody tries to ask you questions about anything and I'm not there, you need to tell them, I'm not answering any questions without my mom. And he said, okay. I said, and the next thing you need to say is, I want a lawyer right now. Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't matter how old you are. If you say you want a lawyer, they have to provide you a lawyer.
And, these cases, I think, highlight a lot of the conflicts with the way that our law system works. There's a fellow journalist out there in Idaho, Mark Reinhardt, that we're hoping to have on in the future that brought some different case law to my attention that he's been kind of trying to pull up. And it sort of illustrates that there's a lot of belief in the CPS and law enforcement system that they have the right to overstep the normal constitutional protections because they're there for the children and that those protections don't exist. And the courts have repeatedly upheld that they do exist and that by overstepping their bounds that they're creating this bad situation. You know what I mean? So we're going to really be looking into this issue along with, I'm sure, your guys' advocates and attorneys and friends and everybody else that's out there rooting for you guys on this. But definitely, I feel really bad for these kids, your children, and Lindsay's kids who are still waiting to come home. I just wanted to tell you that we're, supportive of you. If you would like to leave any information for our viewers, is there a website that people can be directed to stay up to date on what's happening in this situation?
I'm going to be completely honest. I'm what they call internet stupid. But
no, the internet challenge. There you go.
Right, internet challenge.
I did post the Facebook page for the Idaho 3. Is that the best place, or is it the moms? Are they kind of the ones keeping up to date on what's happening?
The moms put up the Idaho 3 to raise money for our legal fees, to get our retainers for all our lawyers that for the CP cases and for whatever might be to come. And so Moms for Marijuana did put up the 3 page. So I do believe that on Facebook they still have it up, and you can read like the updating. Like we'll always put links up there to the newer web interviews and things like that we get.
And I'm going to link the Compassionate Idaho Medical Marijuana campaign up there as well. So we're going to cut to a break. Thank you so much for being with us, Sarah, and I hope everything calms down around your house and gets better from here on, and we'll keep fighting to make sure it doesn't happen to anybody else.
Yeah, we're still fighting here too. Thank you.
Thank you. You're listening to it. We'll be right back after a quick break.
DSL, she deep throat, eating it like a damn blue ghost. And if she don't, then that's game over. Money ain't a game, but I'm the controller. Look into my eyes, I'm gunning for the prize like I'm running out of lives.
What makes something funny? How does humor impact health and psychological well-being? How can you incorporate humor into everyday life? A concise, reader-friendly introduction to an important but often underappreciated topic in modern psychology, Humor 101 explains the role of comedy, jokes, and wit in the sciences and discusses why they are so important to understand. Psychology professor Dr. Mitch Earlywine draws from his personal experiences in stand-up comedy to focus on how humor can regulate emotion, reduce anxiety, and diffuse tense situations, expose pretensions, build personal relationships, and much more. He irreverently debunks the pseudoscience on the topic of humor and leaves readers not only funnier, but better informed. It's part of the Psych 101 series from Springer Publishing, Humor 101 by Dr. Mitch Earlywine, Ph.D.
Funky roller ring.
Oh, yeah.
What's happening, Groovy Cats? This is your Funk Master of Ceremonies, Big Daddy. And I want you to join me every Thursday night at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, right here at the Funky Roller Ring.
Oh, yeah.
Your home of soul, funk, and disco, baby.
Funky-licious.
There's always a party at the Funky Roller Ring.
I was down, I was blue, I had nothing to do. An old friend said, stay here if you wanna. Well, she sure did smell sweet. I needed rest from.
And now we're back with a different view.
Well, you can't not miss the big news of the last couple of days, and that's been the 3 women that were found to be alive after being missing 9+ years. One of them was a well-known case, Amanda Berry, and then 2 other young women. Let's see if I can remember their names, if it's in this article. Anyway, we'll post this.
I'm posting it to Facebook as we speak.
So anyway, so there were 3 women taken, 3 young women. One was 14, 15, and I think one was 20. I'm just giving you the summary here. But anyway, they were kidnapped from the same neighborhood and held captive all this time in the same area. And what's sad about that is that there were clues, and I find. Sorry, hit mute.
I was going to say, it just got quiet. I didn't know if that was me. All right, say what you were saying again.
I said I find it really interesting. These 3 women who were missing in the same neighborhood were held captive in the same area underneath the police's nose, underneath the police. Sorry. Anyway, and yet if this were a pot house or a grow house, it makes you wonder how much they would have gone in and really investigated. There were times when the police did come to this house twice. There were reports of a naked woman in the backyard. There was, screaming. The police came to the door twice and really didn't do anything. They didn't investigate. They didn't follow up. They really just kind of didn't take it seriously. However, if this were marijuana, they'd be busting down the door.
Well,
so it makes you wonder if maybe, if we think something horrible is going on, if we, call marijuana and they come bust down the door.
And a lot of the neighbors, after the fact are kind of questioning themselves of having noticed, a lot of little oddities, nothing that you would call the police for, like he brought a lot of McDonald's home and they thought he lived alone, So he's feeding these people inside and, bringing home food for at least 4 people.
And he lives alone, yeah.
Yeah, and they reflected back and realized that these were odd. It just never clicked that it meant anything. But a lot of them had weird feelings about the place. They didn't want their kids nearby. It was just something about it creeped them out. So, and the neighbor that thinks that you've got a funny smell coming from your place is usually enough to get you a little bit of intrusion.
Right,
Depending upon where you live depends upon how much intrusion, But police look for things like fans in the window.
Right.
People coming by late at night, not necessarily
naked women in the backyard. Random screams from women in a house that's supposed to be vacant or not vacant, and nobody's really sure. I don't know. I mean, his behavior and some of the ways they were describing it, to me, I don't know. Some of those things might draw attention in my book. I mean, lots of people around here, they have, in the summer, they'll use tinfoil on the windows to block things out. There's things that people do that I don't pay attention to, but, police would investigate, assuming it may be a grow house. I don't know. I think that there's things that happened here that would cause suspicion, at least more than just a knock on the door.
Right. And
I just wonder if it wasn't that important. You know what I mean? You got to wonder if they just didn't.
The idea that the woman was running around naked in the backyard and the cops, were called because he was get in here, and they all thought it was kind of funny at first, and then, thought it was kind of strange. And in most instances, I mean, while there's nothing wrong with running around naked in certain areas, especially your own yard, you would think that if it was striking enough that they called the police, that the police would have inquired to speak with these women or, something, even just to, like a welfare check is what they usually call it, And so you kind of wonder, again, in retrospect, what happened in that instance, because they do take things so far, as we just heard from Sarah and Lindsay in Idaho with the concern over the young children. And some of these people were fairly young when they went missing, from what I understood.
Well, Amanda Berry, she was last seen on April 21st, 2003. On the eve of, she was almost 17. She was going to turn 17 the next day. Michelle Knight, she vanished August 22nd, 2002, and she was 21. And then let's see, DeSuze, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. She disappeared.
I think it was
DeJesus, thank you. I slaughter names like everything else. April 2nd, 2004, and she was only 14.
Right, and that's what I remember. That a couple of them were quite young, and if they had come to the house and found the parents smoking marijuana, they would have been a lot more aggressive at it. Either way, though, it just sort of illustrates that law enforcement has better things to do, if nothing else. I mean, if we are going to be intrusive in these things, can't these be the cases that we're intruding, for? Why does it have to be for these other issues?
It makes you wonder, in the beginning of this, when these girls started missing, I'm sure they all went missing from really close by, and then there was, all these random things. It makes you wonder, why the police weren't doing more investigating. What happened in the earlier days when they finally, gave up, if you will, became a closed case, or when they assumed that these women were all deceased. It makes you wonder what was going on that was more important, or where the police were spending their resources when, are we spending enough on missing children instead of this? I mean, I don't know.
Unfortunately, we never get those answers unless we have a rare case like this where they are found years later, and that brings the topic back out into the spotlight where the public is saying, well, what was going on all of this time? Why weren't they found sooner? How were they found? now. What did we do right? What did we do wrong?
Right.
And so it's really good for these women, of course, that they were found, but also really good for, I think, the public at large, because a lot of people hear about these missing children and then they never hear about them again, and they don't know where these stories go and when people quit looking and what happens.
Well, and this is what the third or fourth case just within the last, I don't know, 6 years where missing children have become found. You know, I mean, what was the last one just before this? Young woman who had 3 children in the backyard of a known pedophile, and they didn't do anything. And there was, you know, again, then he even had a weekly visit from I think a probation officer, and still no one bothered to look in the backyard where there were tents and feces. And I'm thinking, why is it so much easier for them to bust a marijuana grow site than it is to catch a pedophile that doesn't move and a probation officer comes to their house every week? It just doesn't make sense.
So this last weekend, globally, as we were talking about last week, people around the world were marching to change our laws and redirect our law enforcement attention to more important matters. We do have a clip of me speaking a little bit about the importance of contacting your legislature. So we're going to play that real quick here. And then we've got a couple of other video clips.
Good. You know, I try to get across, you know, the gun people out there, you know, the beer drinkers out there, the cigarette smokers out there, the guys that want to jump off a cliff and risk their lives. There's one word that we all have in common, and that's freedom. They want to be able to jump off those cliffs. They want to be able to drink a beer. Well, we want to be able to smoke a joint, and that's what we all do today. And we want to be able farmers to grow hemp. There's a whole industry. There's a whole industry out there of hemp. We want to be able to support hemp. I mean, why can't we support hemp? So, guys, we have many, many activists, many, many different people from many, many different groups doing many things in this. And one thing, last year, you guys remember, we all voted for Measure 80. Man, one of the great things about Measure 80 was it actually made the ballot. You know, a lot of times we don't make the ballot. Well, you know what? I'm comfortable in saying that a lot of people made that happen, but there was 2 really instrumental people that made that happen because they were out there getting the signatures. The signatures is why we got Measure 80 on, and that was Idaho, and that was Jennifer Alexander. And we appreciate that. Jennifer, come up here and say a few words and tell this community about freedom and about what you're up to these days.
Hey, everybody. I wanted to tell you guys how excited I was to see last year, you know, us get it on the ballot. Washington and Colorado did it. They legalized. We are like inches away from freedom. Can you guys smell it? I smelled it when we were marching. I think that the biggest thing that a lot of people don't realize is how important it is that we talk to people about this. For years and years and years, people have hidden the closet. They've hidden in their houses, in their cars, hiding smoke in their joints, not telling anybody about it. And that's why we're still here with illegal marijuana. That's why we still have prohibition. The biggest thing that you all can do to change things, this march, this is great. This is publicity. But the biggest thing that you can do is to go home and talk to people about it. Tell your neighbors, tell your church, tell your school, tell your teachers. Teach your kids. Teach everybody. Tell them about the importance of the freedom that comes with prohibition. And the argument isn't whether or not pot's good. It doesn't matter if it's the worst thing on the planet. It's about freedom. So we can't get lost in all these arguments. Now, don't get me wrong. I think pot is good. I think there's a lot of benefits to it. However, that's not the fight that we're fighting. The fight that we're fighting is that we have a right to do this. It's none of your damn business. That's the fight that we're fighting. Okay. That we should have a right. If you can drink a martini, take a couple of shots of whiskey, why can't I smoke a joint? So here's the thing. You need to call your legislature. The greatest majority of people never talk to Congress.
Are you talking to me, talking to you?
It only takes a quick phone call. Just call them and say, you know what? I support reforming our marijuana laws. You represent me. Please support changing our laws. That's it. It's that simple. You don't have to be educated about all the fine details or the legal. It helps if you are. The more information you got, the better. But it can be a simple phone call and say, hey, I support this. Please represent me by supporting it. And if you make those phone calls, call your state representative, call your state senator, Call the federal representative and the federal senator. Those are the 4 people that represent you, and they need to hear your voice. Call them once a month. Call them every day. Just make sure they hear you speaking. There's also town halls and coffee and stuff where you can go sit with your legislator and talk to them and be like, hey, what do you think about this? Change these laws. We want to see it end. We've got 19 states, I believe, now with medical marijuana, something like 24 states with decriminalization and 2 states with legalization. We are well on our way. We just need to be louder. Make sure you're talking to people, your legislature, your neighbors. Make sure everybody knows. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for going home and talking about it.
Wow, Jennifer, you did great. That was awesome.
Well, thank you.
Scott did great, too. Now, he was the MC of the event, wasn't he?
Yeah. And so now we've got some footage of the march. This is in Portland, Oregon, people marching to end prohibition. Mm-hmm. We've got you up on the camera. I want to see the march. But I think so. But anyway, we've got different people. There's Brian the Red, who's on the show with Russ.
And he does the Pink Leaf Project.
Yes, and all kinds of great activists were out there. Russ spoke, Scott Erbthrasher was there, of course. We had Manuela Martinez, Lee Berger spoke about some of the bills going through Congress that our Oregon House to reform penalties on marijuana possession to make it a misdemeanor. Oregon's never had a misdemeanor before, so that's all been moving forward and awesome. We've had some good things happen here.
Well, Oregon is it's poised to be the next state to legalize. I really do believe that. I think within the next voting session, we will definitely have another legalization initiative to vote for. But this time, it sounds like it's going to come right out of legislature.
It's looking good, I think, for that. It's still working its way through. And last I heard, I think it was sort of hanging out, but it's promoting the dialogue, I think, is the most important part. And there's a couple of different bills going through to reform the laws in different ways.
Yeah, there's a dispensary bill and another one to add PTSD to OMA currently. Now,
and the PTSD one's making really good progress. That one is, I think, very likely to pass.
Yeah, I think
the other ones are making good progress, and I'm really hoping to see at least a dispensary system come out of this. And I'd really love to see the legislature put that to the people to vote on legalizing and regulating marijuana, which is it's making discussion. Like I said, I don't know how far it's going to end up going. But,
the rumors that I've been getting from people who are involved in the PTSD are definitely say that one's going to pass. Well, we're going to take a quick break. Safety meeting of such, and then we will be back. You're listening to Different View with Jennifer Alexander, and I'm Iva Cunningham.
And if it don't work out, I will be okay. Every day I sit around and I play a little bit.
Sergeant Craig Simpson.
There are other tests which officers can perform that may help them to make this determination. Tests such as one called lack of convergence, which looks to see whether or not a person is able to cross their eyes. Marijuana is a drug that prevents a person from being able to cross their eyes. Interestingly, it is the only drug category that doesn't allow a person to cross their eyes and also does not allow the person to exhibit a jerkiness of their eye. So it's a unique drug in that sense that is the only one to provide that influence.
Georgia. Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 1920s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
Do another one here. This is my version of Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville. A little different, though. We had to bring it up into the 90s, you know, somewhat. It's now called Marijuanaville. It goes like this. Rolling my homegrown, smoking a big bone. Look at that ganja covered with oil. Oh my God. Using my tweezers. Got pot in the freezer. Whoa! Made a new pipe out of aluminum foil. We stayed away again in Marijuanaville, searching for my.
And now we're back with a different view.
All right. Well, thank you for listening. This is our last segment. Russ is going to queue up some more of the march. So, about how many people were at the march this weekend, Sarah? Or, I mean,
Jennifer. You know, I don't know what the count was. I didn't see any actual tallies. It wasn't enormous by any means, but it was a nice showing. It was we didn't do like in past years here in Portland where they reserved the whole square and did vending and that sort of a thing.
So there was no vending this year at all? Was that
no. This year was a First Amendment march. It was a free permitted march instead of the fee permitted march that we've done in past years. And so what that means is there was just a small section of the square used for the service, you know, the benefit of the speakers and that sort of a thing. There was probably a few hundred people at least, and I'm really bad at estimating, you know, large crowds, but I know that the march was a lot denser than it felt like last year. There was a strong showing of people coming through the streets, and it was more important to me than the number of people was seeing the vast amount of the community coming together, people that have been at odds in previous years, all marching side by side. And I think that speaks volumes to what's happening in our local activism community, and it's really important, you know, that we are all united, at least in reforming these laws. And a lot of times in the past, people have kind of gotten lost in unrelated issues, you know, personal differences. And this year, everybody was standing side by side. So
that's good. That's great. It was such a nice day Saturday too for marching. It was quite pleasant, a little on the warm side, but in years past have been kind of yucky. But so Russ has got the other videos queued up. Go ahead and let them roll. This will be Sarah Frank.
It does. It does not heal cancer. It does kill cancer. It does not kill cancer. It does. Google it. Look up. The Seth group will show you online. It helps with nausea and symptoms, but it does not. It kills it. You should really do some research. I hope you will. The U.S. government holds the patent.
Nice.
That was KGW's new Channel 7 was interviewing Sarah when that woman interrupted.
Right in the middle of the interview, you always have the hecklers, you know.
Interesting. She handled that very well. I think, sometimes it's difficult to be confronted by that. I mean, Jennifer, you and I remember you and I standing on against Pioneer Square, as a matter of fact, after some event, and remember a woman coming up, and she was quite irate and aggressive. I mean, I believe she was poking her finger in your chest or poking it on you, and I mean definitely getting physical. So it's really important, and I think Sarah did a really good job of demonstrating grace under fire and handling a heckler, but backing it up with some evidence. Like, yeah, the U.S. government owns a patent on it. Why would they own the patent on it?
And I think ultimately my own experience in dealing with people who are convinced that of the harm, of the risk, of the bad nature of what I'm trying to do by reforming the laws, for instance, was that if you just equip them with knowledge, they're probably going to walk away not believing you.
But like they might Google it.
While we were talking about earlier about propaganda, if they're hearing it often enough, they're going to start to question if there is some validity to this.
Right.
And while I hate to be a propagandist. I mean, that's marketing. That's how you educate people. It's the more you're saying it, the more likely they are going to be to question the validity of this.
All right, so now we're going to listen to Russ's speech. Go ahead with that, Russ.
I just got back from Idaho because a friend of mine named Lindsay Reinhardt, who is the chief petitioner for their medical marijuana bill out there, she's a multiple sclerosis patient. There was an incident at school. Some kid got a hold of some weed, so naturally they blamed her kid for giving it to him, even though there was no evidence of that, just because she's the top medical marijuana person. And then sent cops to her house, took her kids away to foster care, and now she's facing felony charges. That same exact week, there was a case just across the county where a woman left her 3-year-old and her 10-month-old in the car alone, went back into the house, neglecting the fact that she had a loaded .45 in the car. The 3-year-old got a hold of the loaded .45 and shot the 10-month-old in the cheek. Did she get her kids taken away from her for child endangerment? No. No. Did the cops come to her house and start to charge her with endangering kids and feel like they need to be put in foster care? No. But the multiple sclerosis patient who's using cannabis as medicine is a danger to her kids? Bullshit. That ain't right. And this is not just an isolated case. Look up Daisy Bram, B-R-A-M, Daisy Bram in California. In California, people. Where there's medical marijuana since 1996, she's been charged with child endangerment because she was breastfeeding and she's a medical marijuana patient. And they say, oh, you're passing cannabinoids through the breast milk to your baby. Despite the fact that breast milk naturally has cannabinoids in it in the first place. Yeah. I found 5 cases in the past week where children aged 4 and under had gotten a hold of a loaded weapon and fired it, either hurting or killing themselves, another kid, or an adult. 5 cases. Not one of those cases were the parents charged with child endangerment or neglect or being reckless or any charge. It was just an accident. Oops, you left your kid alone with a loaded weapon. Oops, just an accident. That same week, I found 5 more cases of people busted for having a marijuana plant in their home where they were charged with child endangerment and the kids were put into foster care. Wow. That's why I come out here every year to march. That's why I fly coach all over this country to talk to people. And that's why I will not stop until we have the same equal rights as our beer drinking friends. Are you with me? Yeah! Now remember, activism starts with act, and you've done the first thing by acting today. You went out and did more than 99% of any cannabis activist ever does, and you put your feet on the street, and you put your face in public, showing that you support this. So give yourselves a hand.
Well, that was Russ's speech. That was great. I'm glad that you were able to sum that up so concisely for us, Russ, because the stories about foster care, CPS, marijuana, all of that, it infuriates me. I get on a rant. So.
Well, I think you can't help but get angry when you start looking at it from the perspective of, they're supposed to be helping our children. And there's very little evidence that that's what happened in these cases. The Daisy Bram case, Lindsay Reinhardt, Sarah Caldwell. I mean, we can go down the list over and over again. There's just thousands of kids that have ended up in child custody or the state custody just because somebody had some marijuana in their home.
Yeah, and we talked to Sarah a little bit about the kids coming back from foster care, and if anybody wants to hear what it's like when they're leaving, Daisy Bram, freemybabies.org, has the audio of when her children were taken from her custody. So we are going to wrap up today's show. I hope our viewers will be back with us next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Pacific time. You can check us out on Facebook at 420 or A Different View, and then Twitter ADV420. Thank you for being with us. We'll see you next time.
All right, thanks for listening.
So there
there, Mr. DUI. Who do you think you are? You breathe into a breathalyzer just to start your car. Instead of blowing out, you could have been sucking in. I bet you'd do things my way now if you had to do it over again. You'd like to smoke weed, and you'd like it a lot.